So tonight, introduce you to Doug Friend, VK4GHZ. He's Mr. Microwave in Brisbane area. So Doug's one of the guys who inspired me to get into microwaves. So I thought I'd get him along just to do a little brief introduction of some of the stuff that he's done over the years. So welcome, Doug.
Good to be here. I don't know about being Mr. Microwave, but I've been playing microwaves for quite a long time, and probably inspired by my trips to England, where I've met people that are and seen it all happening, and I've come back here and I've been operating on my own for a good number of years until a recent influx of people around Brisbane. So it's been interesting that way. I put together a little talk. Wasn't quite sure where to go with the talk, but hopefully by the end of it you'll have a bit of an idea of that it isn't really insurmountable. You can actually do things on microwaves with some simple stuff, and if you're fascinated enough you can actually get involved and do some more complex things. I'll start just by showing a few pickies. Russell VK3ZQB out on location. We're trying a long distance shot on 10 gigs and 24 gigs to somewhere else. Now here's the late great Wally Green. He only passed away earlier this year or late last year I think, but at just the age of 100. But he was still active on microwaves right up to the end. But what I'd like to draw attention to here is this little box on the wall, because in the 1980s he made that in Albany by himself, no significant test equipment around. He made it from parts, from diagrams and things like that, got it going, and was one of the first, well, was the first person to bridge the Great Australian Bight on microwave frequencies. What an amazing fellow to produce that stuff there. I mean, he mail ordered stuff from all around the world and put it together, but remarkable fellow. Anyway, he's in the annals of history now. Here's yours truly operating on 1296 megahertz, operating in the UK, and it might have been that very occasion that I was using that antenna, working across to the Netherlands from the UK, not far from the east coast of the UK. One of the things that's happening in the UK is that instead of people just going out portable, which was what they used to do, they're now setting themselves up on microwaves as home stations, and it's a whole different ball game, because you can be on a lot more frequently than just the odd weekends. You can wait around and even point your antenna at someone and just wait for the propagation to happen, because the variations in propagation are equally, if not more, fun than all the variations in propagation you get with HF when you're just different. Were some of you here for the last shootout day? Well, we had a line of dishes just outside the door here. Well, that's the American Northern Lights Radio Society, their gathering of dishes on some sort of activity day, which looks pretty impressive, doesn't it? But I think you'll find most of those are on 10 gigahertz. It's the most common band over there. The question is, what makes these fellas pursue this kind of activity that wives and non-amateur radio people think is crazy? What makes us do this? I mean, you'll have your pet things you'll be interested in, and some of you I know are interested in microwave. But what makes us do this? Any suggestions?
Because not many people do it.
We do it because not many people do it? Because we're being a bit unique?
Yeah.
Right, yeah, okay.
Because we can.
Because we can?
Sometimes.
All right, anyone else?
Because you have to make a lot of your stuff yourself.
Yeah. That's getting close to where it comes from. What do you get most satisfaction out of?
Getting something going.
Yeah. Getting stuff going, isn't it? Yeah, and that's really what I want to cover in this talk here. But yeah, what makes it tick? What drives it? And once you get a number of people together like that, it really inspires and gets things going well. So it's fun. There is a challenge in there. Does anyone not like a challenge? If it was really easy, would you do it? Maybe some would try it and then go on to something else, wouldn't you? Okay, so there's a challenge in there, and one of the beaut things is that you can go out and operate on a mountain top, hilltop somewhere or other, you know, operating out of the, dragging all the stuff out of the back of the car, you know, batteries, fresh air, sunshine, rain.
Bloody rain.
And that is really special fun. I love every minute of it, and I'm set up with a van now so that I can handle a bit of wet weather. But your trusty president up there keeps complaining that he doesn't put his awning up when it's going to rain. And the huge amount of personal satisfaction you get out of operating and succeeding in these sorts of things. All right, which bands are we talking about? Let's say 1296 is the starting band. Then we just go up and up and up. 2403, 3400, 5760, 10368, 24048, 47088 megahertz. 76 gigs is available, and of course goes on and on, as I was saying. Now I want to draw attention to the fact that holders of standard licenses do have access to these three bands: 1296, 2.4 gigs and 5.7 gigs. These are not out of the question as far as building stuff and getting something fun going. So anyone who might be just a little bit interested, you know, give 1296 and 2.4 and 5.7 gigs a go. And there's also plenty of surplus equipment that can be modified for at least 2.4 and 5.7 because they're close to Wi-Fi. And the structure of the rest of this talk here is a bit about building gear or buying it, if that's your choice. Some people find it really hard to build stuff, and to some extent you can actually go out and buy some of this material but not all. So what do you need? You need an IF radio. What have we got? Multi-mode. The options are an old FT290R or the trusty old FT817. Terrific little radio for IF on microwaves. And if you can track down the 290R, that's a fairly good one as well, but it's only on 2 meters, whereas the 817 can go, well, all bands, HF to 70 centimeters. I would encourage you to even consider using little radios like this. Consider it, FM only. This one's on 2 meters and this one's on 23 centimeters. But I find them a really clever way to get onto a microwave band with a small amount of stuff, and yeah, quite good. In fact, this little box here, I might come back to it, there's an antenna for it, is a complete station on 2.4 gigs. That amount of stuff. Because there's the IF radio there. Little 70 centimetre credit card size Alinco. So that just requires a 12 volt supply, and it works. Not, you know, it's not like your state of the art, but it certainly works. I'm going to talk about things like that a little bit later. So FM, and the Japanese, and they're playing microwaves, generally use FM, and they use FM handhelds. They're not so much using CW and sideband. Part of the reason for it is that on microwaves you're very often doing line of sight paths, and when it's line of sight paths it's strong signals, and you don't need the the added advantages of SSB or CW over FM. The FM's fine. You either have got it because big strong signals, or you don't have it and you haven't got it. So now the next thing you're going to need is a transverter of some sort. You either buy it or build it. So let's look at the buying options first. There's an Australian crowd called Mini Kits that sells certain things. Look through their website. They've got a lot of kits, as the name suggests, but you can pay an extra bit and get him to build it. Graham, VK4GHZ has done some amazing promotional things in making fairly interesting kits available for every band from 70 centimeters up to 10 gigahertz. Down East Microwave Company in Florida have a whole range of ready-made or kits and odd parts. There's a well-known company in Germany, Kuhn, otherwise known as DB6NT because that's the call sign of the founder of the company, who makes top quality stuff and sells them at a top quality price. But with the exchange rate to the euro that's been fairly good of recent times, quite a lot of Australians have been going down that path. There's another company in Germany called Eiche Kafka, which sells kits and parts and all sorts of interesting things there, so that's worthy of note. And then if you like going out and taking your chances and seeing what's available, it is quite interesting looking and trawling through United States eBay, and of course a little bit of Australian eBay, and in the UK and Germany and other places like that. Generally they link up, but sometimes you find something on one of them that's not on the others. Just recently I tracked down this patch antenna, which is on 10 gigahertz, and I didn't think it was going to be working on where I wanted it. It might be on the the commercial band there, but it works best at 10.368 or something, or 10.34. And I think that's one that everyone here will know, I guess. VK Classifieds. And here in Brisbane we've got a unique thing, the RF shop. Who's heard of the RF shop? 17 Mile Rocks. Amazing. Here in Brisbane, where you would have to say that the communications industry is not leading the country. There is an Englishman come out here and settled in Brisbane, and he's started this thing here. He does a lot of online sales. All right, let's look more. I encourage you to consider building. But the other thing you can do is buy modules and then build them into a working system. So what are the minimum requirements? Obviously you've got to know where you're going, have a plan, and some sort of performance to start with, but it's a matter of deciding. Talk to your mates, decide do you want to have something that's only running 10 milliwatts to a small antenna, or do you want to run several watts to a big dish? You can start doing either of those things, but you probably get a lot more fun and encouragement if you start on a simple project first. Yeah, I've already talked about acquiring the bits of it, and then the challenge is testing what you've built. And, some people have got a range of reasonable test equipment. I know 2 people in the room who have, and 3, if I include myself. But you don't need, every person building something new doesn't need a whole stack of new test equipment, because we're all willing to share. And in fact, on the recent activity day, I felt pleased to make a contact on 5.7 gigs with someone who had put one of these together. I don't know if you're here. It was his first, he built this mini kits set up for 5.7 gigs and just believed it was working but wasn't sure. He comes on the air and we have this contact over 150 kilometres. It was quite good fun for both of us. So it's not out of the question, and many of the kits, particularly the Kuhn kits, you can't go wrong. A multimeter is quite adequate for tuning them up because the filters are pretty good. And of course the other thing is going out and using it. That's why we're running numbers of these activity days, and there are contest days too if you want to get involved in that. But go out and use it. It's even more satisfaction. Let's get on with building stuff. You can make it complex, like this looks like. Some of you will be familiar with this old radio. It used to be an IC202. It's got a bulbous thing on the side, and that doesn't have a 2 metre whip anymore. It's got a 10 gigahertz slot antenna on the back of it. But in here, it's basically, as I tune this, it's tuning across 10 gigahertz, and it's fun to use, and I've taken that to the UK and used it many times in the UK. But you'd say it's reasonably complex because there's a whole lot of RF stacked into 2 layers that are inside there going down into the battery compartment. So yes, you could start with something like that, but the alternative is that you could start with something as simple as this. There's the IF radio, and this is a what's called a oscillator brick. Just apply power and it oscillates and comes at quite a stable signal after warm up on about 1900 megs, and it goes straight into a mixer, and they hook the IF radio onto here, and a simple filter comes out here, and there's the antenna connection, maybe running 1 or 2 milliwatts on 2.4 gigs FM, and numbers of contacts have been had with that by different people, and it's quite a lot of fun. Still talking about 2.4 gigs, but now a little bit more complex. An old RF oscillator board, and then what does it come out here? A filter and a multiplier, and then more filtering and multiplying and more filtering, coming out on about 2.2 gigahertz. No, more like 2.3, and then that goes into a mixer that's down here. The IF radio, which is a 147 meg IF radio, plugs into here, FM radio, and it hooks in there, and then it detects the RF coming from the radio and changes between receive and transmit, and then there is a receiving amplifier and a transmitting amplifier and changeover relay. A little bit more complex than the first one, but it's running a receiving preamplifier, and it's running a about 50 milliwatts on transmit. Now you'd say 50 milliwatts. I've got a 100 watt HF radio or 6 meters radio. 50 milliwatts? Hopeless, isn't it? No. If you go to the top of a hill, a line of sight path, for many years I was using little commercially made little block made by the Mytech company, and its rated frequency is up to 9.6 gigahertz, but I found that it worked quite okay on 10.3, and it runs 50 or 60 milliwatts on 10 gigs, and for a good, I don't know, 5 or 6 years that was all I was using on 10 gigs, from the likes of Springbrook right up to Mullaney and places like that. So you don't, on microwaves, unless you're trying to push the signals over the line of sight, further than the line of sight, you don't have so many problems. The other thing that, of course, that happens is that dishes have got a lot of gain. The typical, let's say a 2 metre station might have 13 or 14 or 15 dB gain in their antenna, and I mean, you get 13 or 14 or 15 dB gain just out of a horn antenna that big. You want to get involved and do these different options of antennas and transmitting amplifiers and receivers and all that stuff. But it can be simple, as I've already been describing. And as I'm emphasising, start simple, and especially when you've got a group of people around you, simple is fun. I'm sure that that big group of people with the Northern Lights Amateur Radio Society there, that with all those dishes across the bottom of the screen, they would have all started with something simple. Now there's a complex thing. This was made by G3 PYB, but there is a complete transverter for 47 gigahertz. Now, I'm not encouraging you to try 47 gigahertz to start, but there's quite a lot of RF happening in that box, and the stuff that can't be in the box is sitting out here in the open using a machined dish looking like that. But this is a VK4GHZ special, the famed strawberry box transverter on 2.4 gigs. It doesn't exist anymore because the parts have been taken and brought into other things. But gathering a few bits together, an oscillator, chain, mixer, filters, power amplifier, gathering them all together and just laying them out in a cardboard box. You can actually optimise the layout of things without drilling any holes. It's just there in the box. And then you can work out what's going to work best and everything like that. Yep, simple is fun. Building a transverter, you've got to start with a local oscillator multiplier chain. Obviously you design what frequency it is, and you're going to have an IF radio, because the IF will be either on 144 or 432 or 433 or something like that. There's even commercially made units around the place that operate with a 50 or 53 meg IF. So you could, it's no hard and fast rule as to what frequency you would like the IF radio to be on, but the one that you've got is actually better to use than the one you're planning. Starting about, got to be 20 years ago, maybe more, the well-known English microwaver Sam Jewell G4DDK Delta Delta Kilo produced this design, and there were hundreds and hundreds of them sold around the world, and they work quite well, really. There's a crystal oscillator in there and multiplies to 300 megs to 600 megs there, then nominally 1.3 or 4 gigs there, and then 2 point something gigs down in this near the output stage, all in the one. And that really got homebrew microwave going, because people could buy this as a kit and just go off and use it. Then came along the modifications you could put on with this thing, where it doesn't have a crystal in it. So what you've got to generate is a signal, a clean signal that's going to go into a mixer that will mix with the IF radio that will produce the desired output, or it will receive properly. So getting this signal here is one of the challenges, I'd have to admit that. But if you buy ready-made units up working already, then you don't have terribly many problems. But to make it even easier, at the moment, right at this moment, for the last less than a year, ZL2BKC has been producing these ready-made oscillator boards called the ZL-PLL. Anyone familiar with them? Yeah, quite a few. And if you want a quick quick local oscillator signal, anywhere between 100 odd megs, 130 odd megs, and 4 point something or other gigahertz, this has got to be the way to go. Work really well. It's very easy to get to learn how to use them. Another option here, this is quite common, and it is in the way that VK4GHZ does with his one. You've actually got a separate mixer for transmit and receive, and the local oscillator feeds signals, half of it into there and half of it into there, and that then leads to separation of the transmit and receive signal paths. Here's the dead simplest one of all, and that's what you're seeing with these things here. Local oscillator multiplier of some sort, a brick is good, straight into a mixer, straight through a filter and out to the antenna. So the antenna can either be a horn, and they're very interesting antennas because their capture area is well defined, and I quite liked using them, in fact, and some of you might have seen the oversized one that I had out here at the last test and tune-up day and the shootout day. Patch antennas. Here's a couple of patch antennas on 3.4 gigs, and this one's on 10 gigs, but there are plenty of patches on the surplus market for 2.4 gigs and 5.7 gigs, because that's where a lot of the data services are doing their things, and they're selling stuff into commercial areas.
Excuse me, Doug, those patch antennas, is that what you and Wayne were using that day?
Yep.
For that contact? He was now Wolvine.
Yeah, this one still has the current mobile record for 3.4 gigs. Was being used by Wayne, VK4WS, poking out the top of his van from Mount Wolvite, and I was located down in northern VK2, just using patch antennas. So they're not not to be sneezed at. They work quite well. Now here's something I currently use. Instead of having a great big dish, I've now retreated to a smaller dish for 5.7 gigs and 10 gigs. The reason I retreated to a smaller size dish is that it's much easier to point. Instead of having a really sharp beam that's there and then it's not there, you know, I can move this around and just optimise on people. Of course, weak signals is still got to be pretty sharp. So what also is happening in here, this sits on the mast above my van, way up high, in that U-bolt there, sitting up this way of course, so the rain doesn't kill everything. And then what I've got on the back is like the 5.7 gig feed comes out of this dual band feed, goes into a 5.7 gig box which has an LNA and a transmitting amplifier. And then similarly the 10.3 gig feed comes out of here and goes into this box which is an LNA and a transmitting amplifier on there. So all of that's up high. And of course you're going to have to put this on something. So you'll see, you know, you can go and buy these tripods from different places. But a good solid tripod is what you're going to need. Now here's something that challenges all of us. It isn't planning and getting ideas from on the net and looking at other people's gear and everything. Isn't that all nice to do because there's no outlay? There's no commitment yet, and you can get a project working better and better just by planning all the little components that go together with it. But the challenge is to wrench yourself out of that mode and find how you're going to make the thing, because it's got all the electronics you've got to plan, the connection to antennas, supporting antennas, and all the metal work, all of that type of thing. That's where, you know, there's satisfaction at this level here, but there's even more satisfaction at this level. So again, I'm encouraging you to consider doing some of this, and consider it in terms of you know, there is help around. You're not on your own. Some points about operating. On microwaves, it's mostly arranged QSOs. In other words, you know beforehand that you're going to go out and try and contact a certain person, or you've made contact on 2 meters or another, even FM simplex frequency or a repeater or something, and then you go to this other frequency, and you know each person knows they're looking for each other. Know your frequency. You do, in fact, with this, usually with there's an offset, when the thing is not GPS locked, you'll know what approximately that it's maybe 40 or 50 kilohertz down the band or something like that, but because you've had the experiences from earlier times. So there's all sorts of interesting strategies to decide where to point, and how do you know where to point in that direction, because you've got to know what true north is where you are, and have calculated the direction that you're going to beam to get the signal to the other fellow up the other end, because you know where he is. You know, if it's all random and you don't know where he is, then it's a bit of a challenge. But the VK logger, thanks to Adam here, has lots of really good tools for helping you locate where you are and where the other fellow is, and paths and distances and bearings are all done in true, and makes it far easier than it ever was before. But you can do all that with, you know, online services. If you've actually got a, you know, internet on your phone, or if you've got an internet dongle to use with a laptop computer, you can work out all this fairly quickly and fairly readily. I've touched on this before, but low power, you know, 50 milliwatts here, 10 milliwatts there, and about 30 milliwatts on 5.7 gigs going through that one. Line of sight paths, and even slightly not line of sight, slightly obstructed, are amazingly good, and it makes it a lot of fun just to go out and have these sort of contacts. And if you're going to be working with someone at the other end or a group of people, decide beforehand how you're going to talk to each other. You know, this is another use for a 2 metre or 70 centimetre FM handheld, simplex or through a repeater, or 2 metre sideband, quite commonly used. But even similarly commonly used are internet services that Adam provides on the VK logger, and or just plain mobile phone, text messaging and ringing each other on the mobile phone. The options are amazing, but the good thing about the radio contacts and the internet contacts, that if everyone's doing this using the same method, you all can hear each other. You can all sort of know what's going on. That's the whole point. What is going on? Who's going to transmit next? You know, where are you? You know, are you having troubles pointing or something like that? So talk back or liaison is really, really important for getting success on microwaves. That's Roy, VK4ZQ, who's occasionally appeared up here, and his portable setup on Mount Gravatt in Brisbane, and on a trailer, and he's got all bands from 6 metres through to 10 gigs, I think, on there in various ways, and it's quite good. But he's just been passionate about creating all this stuff and integrating it into, you know, something that fits together nicely and all. And that's me set up on Stradbroke Island a few years ago with the whole stack of stuff. That antenna on the top there is electrically elevatable from a horizontal position. The other thing that makes it really fun, and you can see it in Adam's video, is it's not just like, it's not a kind of over there thing with the microwaves. If you're becoming part of the equipment, because you're interacting with it and all that stuff, and pointing it in the right direction, it sort of becomes part of you, and it makes the fun even more. And here's a photograph by VK4GHZ. I love this photograph because you can just feel you're right there with the microwave gear beaming on 10 gigahertz at a shower of rain. Now, we've just got to get used to the idea. A shower of rain is DX, if there's someone at the other end, of course. Rain scatter is fantastic on 5 gigs and 10 gigs, and it even works on 24 gigs too. Works on 3.4, but 10 gigs is really where it happens. So that's the end of the talk. Thanks to all the other people whose pictures I nicked. And any questions? More questions, I mean. Thank you for the ones that you asked along the way.
Safety with microwaves?
Safety? It is an issue. You don't look into, you know.
I was just thinking of the slots on this side, but it's not. That's right.
No, the slot's only on one side on there. It's not significantly more than other things. I suppose if I was running this thing here and it was, you know, at the moment it's running 80 or 90 milliwatts or something into, I can't remember what it's running. Yeah, something in that order. It's coming out this side of the slot antenna. But just as Peter suggested, if it was a dual-sided slot antenna, I wouldn't be standing here, even running that power, just out of respect for the fact. I suppose Kevin might have some medical ideas about that. But yeah, the things that we really got to be concerned about are eyes, and maybe reproductive organs, and
That's right. Have more kids.
you know, this would have 20 dB gain or something. So you run 100 milliwatts in here, and it's as though there's 10 watts coming out the front. And you know, you wouldn't want to be around on this side of that with 10 watts so focused on any part of your body. But behind it, it's quite all right. And of course, passers by, you respect that and you don't transmit when they're there. Which means, like with that picture of me up here, I really like to have these antennas. This is running 40 or so watts on 2.4 gigs. I like to have it up there because it's out of the way of people. And this is running 40 or so watts on 3.4 gigs. Yeah, get it out of the way. But the low power things, the fun things you start with, well, you don't go looking at it, of course, but you know, the risk is low. An interesting situation, though. Yeah, it's worth always thinking about that. If in doubt, run the EMR calculator from VK4GHZ. It's quite good. Any other questions?
Going once, going twice.
All right.
Well, thanks very much, Doug, for and don't be a stranger to come to the club. So yeah, feel free to come and inspect the gear. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, do come up and have a look and ask questions.
Just so you know, it's not terribly expensive. I got this on eBay just recently. It's a 3.3 gig antenna commercial job that I've got for about 120 bucks. And that'd be good for about 65 watts and 3.4 gigs. So, but you can just collect that sort of stuff, and it's quite easy modifiable to get that gear to get that power.